here. And it happened by way of this venue. So don't knock making genuine connections.
Come on.
Beyonce's internet, okay?
Come on, Beyonce's internet.
Because it can totally happen. And so she has an amazing platform, Live Run Sundays, where she brings on these brilliant people and then she adds her own genius to the mix.
They're amazing.
And it becomes this entire just brilliant segment of love and joy and just leveraging our genius in a way that no one really does that I have seen. So please check that out. If you aren't already following her, please follow her yesterday. But I was saying that it was only right for me to kind of kick off these conversations. Because one, you're a huge comfort to me personally. And, I've been gone for a minute, but now I'm back with but you just, even in like your busiest of seasons and in all transitions, you truly make time for people and you just exude like being your authentic self, like no one else that I know. So it was only right that I asked you, but I realized that like, I feel like you're not just your authentic self and you show up as your authentic self as a mom, as a partner, sister, friend, colleague, but you also inspire everyone to want to do it as well because you do it with such joy and you speak such life into everything that you do and everyone that you touch that is like, it's infectious. It truly is infectious. And you have an ability to create safe spaces for people to do them, like truly do them. Whatever it is that is their spark, you're like, light it. Light it, set it ablaze and send it out into the world. And so that makes us, and I've been speaking a lot about this, have this feeling where we can be and also belong in spaces and feel comfortable doing so regardless of how comfortable it is.
Come on.
And I think that is a lot that we're trying to like breathe into our kids is like letting their light shine in all its glory, but also be prepared for the pushback so they don't diminish their light in the face of that adversity as well. And so you model that so brilliantly. And so I love how we connect on so many different levels, just as women and moms and, just friends and educators in this world trying to do this thing. So I'm just really grateful. As you say, love is the ways.
Come on.
It is the way that we need to go. So I just want to thank you. Thank you for hopping on. And
I want to thank you. Listen, I was like, first of all, any space that Jocelyn and I get to be together and just like in community or our talks or our phone calls, it's pure joy. Like part of this work, and it's a continuous process for me, right? Like y'all only see part of it or, what I produce to show. And there are many times where the work, and sis, because we've had, on the side conversations, but this work is tough. This healing work sometimes is, shout out to Nico Diaz, who was just on my show, who talks about in one of his poems that he shares about like a delicious, we have to go into the delicious, disturbing darkness. And sometimes that darkness is, I need to check out like his poetry. His pen is crazy. Yeah. But, going into our delicious, disturbing darkness at times is not fun. But the delicious part is like what we learn. And for me is a daily process. Like, when I talk about my kids and I talk about, them being authentic or them, reprogramming the raising of my kids or how I raise my kids, like I also say that it causes me some dissonance because I am actively every day reprogramming, right?
Yeah.
How I was raised and how, there's a legacy there of how we were raised or culturally or, traditions, and understanding the way that systems shapes those things. So, I appreciate you. I lean into community. Community has been invaluable. My oven is going off. Hold on. Isaiah, turn off the oven. Yo, I'm really being a mom. My oven is going off.
Both and. It's the
I'm
both
sorry, y'all.
and for
I
me.
just, my oven is going off. Just turn it off, Poppy. Thank
And
you.
then what she's gonna do is retract that apology because it's both and
Press
over
cancel.
here.
Yeah,
It's
sorry,
both and
sorry.
over. No, don't say sorry not one more time before I take you off this live.
But yeah, so it's like, it's you try to do these things, and I try to be authentic, and even we'll get into what that means, but it's a daily process, and part of this work is that you cannot do it alone. And I understand
Yeah.
mirrors to be a part of that work, reflections to be a part of the work, and you, sis, are a reflection for me.
Oh.
When you're down, we shoot the ish. When I'm down, we shoot the ish. And so, there's different folks that happens to, and we need that. Like this work, some people just see, what we can produce, or how we're producing, or our smiles, or what we choose, right? Because we also want to lead in love and lead in joy, but oftentimes that work is messy, it's muddy, it's hard, there are a lot of tears, you know
Yeah.
but we actively do it so that we can get to our truest selves, so that we can get to the truest version, that allows us to feel right, because we already whole, but to
Yeah.
feel whole, right, and to honor our wholeness. But it's a continuum. It's a daily process for me, every day, every minute, to try to figure that out for myself. But you need people. This work cannot be done alone. You need people, and you are my people. And
Like,
shout out to Channing that's on. Shout out to Ben that's constantly giving love. And
yeah.
amplifying our voices. Shout out to everyone that constantly shows up for us too, right? We show up for ourselves, we show up for other people. And that's part of the work, that we know that, and that we realize that.
Yeah, yeah. You're one of the interrogators. I call you an interrogator because it's like we're trying to figure out why we don't know what we don't know.
Come on.
We're constantly asking those questions, and you're one of the people that, like, because you're so vocal in the questions you ask yourself, to me it's just like, oh, like, let me now ask this question of myself because I actually don't know that answer either. And so it's like, even in how we receive compliments for each other, so like we love on each other strong and
Come on.
like showing that love, but it's a special kind of like understanding when we can stop and be like, but I feel guilty receiving this love right now in the middle of feeling it, right?
It's true, because that's the only way that we check it, right? So if we don't honor that feeling, right? Like we're in this, like, again, this feeling of dissonance, right? If we don't check it, then we don't get to the root of it, right? If
Yeah.
even as you today, you're giving me compliments, or when people say words about me, right? The dissonance that's caused there is that I still have healing work to do
Yeah.
around what I see for myself, right? what
Yeah.
what I'm attaching to my worthiness. Do I see what my sis sees? And if I don't, right, I have to name that, so that I can hold myself accountable to that healing work, right? If it causes us dissonance, that even
Right.
today my sis is pouring into me, and I pour into folks every Sunday, and it's so easy, and I have hundreds of cards that I literally have memorialize for people on how I receive them, how I love on them, how I love on their work, how I amplify their work. But someone saying a few things about me, still, I have to work past it. But what that tells me is that there's more healing to be done, right? I need to matter to myself first and
Right.
foremost. Right? I need to be able to see for myself. But if we don't acknowledge that, then we're not really getting to the root of, like, okay, there's something happening here. Like, how can I go deeper? How can I work through this, so
Yep.
that then we can work through it?
And how often do kids feel that same thing? And that's the epiphany that I had. Like,
Come on.
we're on this wave of like empower kids and affirm kids and do all of this work. But I often think that we're skipping over a really crucial step in giving kids the space between like hearing what we have to say about them and them actually believing it. and
Come on.
receiving it, because it's so often that they haven't received it, you know? And so it's like we have these moments where we're just like interrogating our thoughts and our feelings and like while internally we're giving pushback in these moments. And I'm like, dang, the kids though. Because, you know, that's how I am. I'm like, we have these adult conversations and I'm like, oh, this happens to the kids. When I had that nightmare, I'm like, oh, the kids have nightmares about this.
I love that. Still one of my favorite. Still one of my favorite reels. Still one of my favorites.
Oh my gosh. I told like teachers that on my session. I'm like, yo, y'all have to understand these things manifest in so many ways for kids. So it's not that simple. It's
Come on.
not just like I'm about to just write all these affirmation stickers and throw them all over my classroom and like kids are going to feel it. They'll see it.
Come on.
Feel it is a whole nother different ball game, and with that comes like grace, it comes patience, and you want to talk about unconditional love for
Come
kids,
on.
like pour into a kid and have them not receive it and you not give up on them, because you need to understand that even we as adults have to get on board with those thoughts. It's not something we just immediately adopt. You know, like the grace that it takes to be an educator is so profound,
Come
and we
on.
don't tap into it enough at all. Because a lot of us don't know what we're doing and being our authentic selves and receiving this. This is new.
And
I
how
said
can you be
podcast.
authentic? Like, you know, as an educator, like most of my time, 10 years in the classroom was scripted curriculum.
Yes.
Right. And so if we are in a scripted curriculum, if we are in a programming, right, then how do we allow pathways for that to happen? And so, you know, that's part of the problem, that folks do not go off script, right? And unfortunately, you know, it took me years to understand that going off script is actually the space that allows you to see, right, to understand the brilliance, to understand the genius, not only about your students but about yourself, right? You know,
Yes.
Dr. Muhammad talks about this. She talks about, you know, teaching as an art, as an artistry, and something that we constantly have to work through, right? And so how can we work through our artistry? How can we work through this craft when we have a script? Right. And then this script is actually an engine, right, to create models of whatever has been scripted. And so how do we then see, right, or acknowledge, right, the brilliance, the genius, the authenticity, the uniqueness of our students if we are looking for the model, if we are shaping this model? And
Reading
so
my mind. You are reading my mind.
you know, since we always in synergy, you know.
Listen, because this is what I wrote. Like, because I remember I told you I'm going way more casual this season. Like, ain't no questions.
Come
It's
on,
just
come
let's rip off
on.
this
We
idea.
just, you know.
But in my reflection, I literally thought like kids are more themselves with kids, and it goes with what you're saying. If we have all of these like scripted, mandated things for how we teach kids, it's assuming that we know kids better than themselves.
Come on.
Kids know and I think when my son is off and he's like on FaceTime or he's on whatever, streaming all these things in games, I can hear it in his voice. Like
Come
I can
on.
hear it in his presence that he is fully himself. He's not thinking about how he's coming off. He's around a group of kids where he's being his authentic self, right? They have riffs, they have this, whatever. But how he speaks to them, the word choice that he uses,
Come on.
I will not assume that I speak 12. As teachers, one of the best things you can do is realize that you don't speak whatever age your kids are. You
Come on.
don't speak 8. You don't speak 9. And so if you approach the learning from that mindset of empowering kids, what if kids thought of themselves as co-teachers in the 2nd grade? What if they considered themselves to be assistant professors? What if we ran our lessons through the kids to change the models to be the best and most relevant for whatever they have going on?
Come
If
on.
they change every word problem to Minecraft or whatever, that makes sense because they're going to speak nine to each other, which is why the power of the turn and talk, the power of conversation in the classroom is so science based. It's stupid not to do it. Like, if you consider success in the classroom to be silence,
Come
you are
on.
actually opposing what happens scientifically in the brain and body for students when they speak and pour into each other. You are eliminating that from your classroom, which is no wonder why you have these behaviors popping off because of
And
what
I never
the hormones are
understand
doing
it.
in the
I
body.
never understand it because, and listen, you must acknowledge the harm that you were a part of and how you were complicit,
Come on.
right?
Yes.
And I was, my programming, especially when it comes to education, is around silence. It's around control.
Catch
It's
W.
around all of those things, right? But what didn't make sense is that then when teachers are in PDs, they don't want to be quiet. We don't want to be quiet. We want to be talking. And
Right.
so and so that click of like, listen, this is the way that we learn. We learn through conversation. We learn through processing, right? We learn through debriefing, right? And
Yeah.
so it took me a minute to like even realize it myself. Like, I'm over here, in the classroom asking for silence and asking for kids to be like, sit up straight and like be still, and like you got to listen to my every word, right? And then when it
Yeah.
comes to a professional, and they used to be in class all day. And
Yeah.
we used to complain about an hour PD, and we wanted to talk, and we wanted to spend time to chop it up with our other teacher friends, and we wanted time
Yeah.
to process with them.
Yeah.
And so, we must make a connection that for our students, for ourselves, like the process of learning, you also have to be like culturally responsive. Like in many cultures, talking and processing and storytelling and all these things are ways in which that can strengthen what we're trying to teach, right? That can
Yeah.
strengthen the classroom culture. And so it just always makes me laugh, because I'm like, yo, I remember like being that teacher that was around, like, you got to sit and be quiet, you got to be still, you got to listen, and
Yeah.
I be the one at the PD, like, hey girl, what's up? Everybody be quiet. And then, the presenter is like, be quiet. We're going to do this for an hour and a half. He used to be mad as hell. And so I'm like, sit with that. Like, when you're in a PD, you as an educator, right? What works for you? Right? What PT have you been to that has been transformative, right?
Yeah.
What PT has been, something that has stuck with you beyond the hour, right? And
Yeah.
so when you think about those elements, then you start to think about like, oh, okay, what are some ways in which I can do this for teaching in any space that you're in, whether it's in a classroom, whether it's with adults, whether it's even with my lives, like, this is a communal experience. This is not, me just asking questions, listening, and asking you more questions. Like, to me, that doesn't work for me, right? And so I've just cultivated, a space that, the learning is communal, even with the folks that are on, right? And
Yeah.
so, yeah, like, but we also have to understand that that's also part of the issue of, preparation programming, how teachers learn about what is most valuable in the classroom. And what's most valuable in the classroom is not that students can be the fullness of themselves, it's control. And so
Exactly.
if we don't acknowledge that, then there is no space for authenticity, right? Because you are
Right.
trying to program somebody to be part of this script that you are initiating, without understanding that everyone comes with a script already. And how are you honoring their authentic selves? And so,
Yeah.
I just, it blows my mind.
It. All
Come
of
on,
it.
sis.
I was gonna read this real quick quote from Ratchet right quick. It says it is the season to have all of who one is on display. It is a
Woo-wee.
time to be all the beautiful things that one is at once. It is a time to be loud and thoughtful, and angry and loving and ratchetemic and academic, with fire in the belly and a desire to push the world to reimagine how they see us and others like us.
Come on.
You know, that's our boy, Dr. Emden. So, like, that speaks to what we were talking about, is like giving kids the opportunity, just how I was just explaining when you were off, when you were switching. I was like, how fired up we get to just connect and go back and forth. Kids have that same reaction when you're teaching, and they want to be able to get it out. So it's on
Their brain
us.
is active. That's why we going
Yes,
back and forth, because your brain is active. You want to be able
yes.
to like go back and forth.
And that's what you want. You're teaching. That means the job is being done. You want them to be lit up. And so it's our job to create those structures in our classrooms that are predictable, calm, and safe, so that they know that, yes, right now I should be silent and I should be listening to this good word that my teacher is giving me right now.
One.
Okay? But because of the structures and the conditions my teachers have made in this classroom, I know I'm going to have an opportunity to share what I am lit up on fire to share right now. I
Come
know
on.
that for a fact. But when students don't know it, they take it. And they take it in ways that are unpredictable and that disrupt the learning community. So, which side are you on? You got to play offense sometimes. You can't always be on defense. So you have to proactively create these structures in order to make that happen, so students know what they can count on. Because
And I think I know that you shared like a definition to authentic, but when I looked at, this idea of authentic, the definition that I found that I thought was really beautiful, it says of undisputed origin, right? Genuine. And one of the talks that really, y'all know I listen, my work is anchored on Black women, is, Nicole Hannah-Jones wrote 1619 Project, right? The origin story. And she talks about the importance of origins, right? She talks about the importance of who's telling that origin story, right? And so we are only the most authentic of ourselves if we know who we are, right? And so once we know who we are, we allow space and cultivate space for students to be able to name and claim who they are, right? And so something that I've been doing with my daughter is, Dr. Muhammad has, when she's talking about the pursuit of identity, she has a question, that she often asks, or she has students ask. I ask this even with adults, where we're learning from each other, is who are you? Right? No interruptions. You are able to name and claim who you are. And at 8 years old, at first, that stumped my daughter. It was almost like, what do you mean?
Yeah.
Because identity is so important. It's twofold. It's how people see us, right? But most importantly, how we see ourselves and what we claim to be, right? It's very powerful to be able to say, I am this, I am this.
Yeah.
Right? And so who's telling that origin story? Is someone else telling that origin story to us? Or are we telling our own origin stories, right? Because if we're not telling our origin stories, then we cannot possibly be authentic, right? If we don't understand our origin stories, then we can't possibly be authentic. And it took me, 34 years, 33 years to understand that I was miseducated, that I've had a colonized mind, that a lot of my upbringing, had a lot of anti-Black rhetoric, right? And until I started digging, like, let me go, who is telling me the origin story of who I am?
Yeah.
Right? And once I started digging and finding who I truly was, the legacy of who I was, right? Then I became more authentic. I became more ratchet. I was able to use my ratchet as a tool. I was able to cultivate spaces to honor people's identity. And so when we think about this idea of authenticity, right, at the core of it, right, is Even other things that I found. You know, I love words, sis. It says,
Yeah.
what does it mean by authentic? It says being actually and exactly what is claimed.
Wow.
Being actually and exactly what is claimed, right?
And
And
who
so with
claimed?
that, it's like every day, who are you?
Yes.
Right? Do we know who we are? And if we
Yeah.
know who we are, who was telling that story?
And
Right?
who's allowing for it to change?
Come on.
Because
Come
that's the first thing that popped into my mind is like, who the origin story, who's telling the story, and who is creating the space for the changes and the evolution of that story.
come on. And
Because we're
understanding
constantly
that our
changing.
identities are fluid, right? Like who I
Always,
was 2 years ago, 2 minutes ago,
always.
something I read changed me. Something I listened to today changed me.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so who am I changes, right? At the core, I'm still Jaribel, right?
Yeah.
But Jaribel evolves, right? You know, I know that Channing said this earlier, like self-actualize. We self-actualize. It is a process until we transition, right? And so who I am, our authenticity, right, is going to be shaped by that, right? What are we listening to? What are the
Yep.
origin stories that we have accepted for ourselves? Which is, sis, back to our original, how we started. When you say all of these beautiful things, when we say all of these beautiful things to our students,
Yeah.
right, if it creates some dissonance, is because someone is telling them something else about themselves. Someone is telling us something that is not true or the
Yes.
truest version of who we are. So it
Yeah.
creates like this, like, well, then who am I?
Yep.
Right? And we
Right
have to
now.
allow space for students to understand who they are. And not only that, for them to be able to name and claim who they are. Are we honoring that? Are they able to speak for themselves for that?
Yeah.
Right?
And
And
just at
so,
the beginning of the year, right? Not just at the beginning of the year.
no,
When we
not just,
all
not
do
just,
all of the we do
it,
all of the getting to know you, who are you, what do you like, and then we hang that stuff up, we put it down, we tuck it away, and then we assume that they're the same for the rest of the time, for the rest of it, right? The rest of the year. How often do you create space for students to add to their stories or change their stories? And how often, like we said, are they able to connect with each other so that they could be influenced in positive ways, or they can change and view their perspective at their age level in different ways?
come
Because
on.
that's
And
the
not
person
just, and
that
not
they see.
even just in your classroom, because sometimes we think like only in our classroom, right? Like, you know, I was a first grade teacher, but my kids went to second grade and to third grade, and
Yeah.
developing relationships even when they're not in my immediate classroom. Like, you know, like how are we cultivating space for that? Like, I know because I'm just who I am. Like, I notice things when kids got haircuts or they
Yeah.
came swaggy to school with their new kicks on. You know
Yeah.
what I'm saying? Like, how are you honoring? Like, how are you, like, it takes a, you know, my brother talks about this, Dr. Emden, it takes a lot for a kid to really think about like, yo, I'm gonna wear this outfit to school, like, and really want to come fresh. And that says something about how even they think about the space. Like, even
Yep.
if they're not in your classroom, right? Like, how are you part of the community beyond just your, you know, 32 kids? I know sometimes I have more.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh God.
beyond your 32 kids, right? Like, how are you even cultivating relationships, not only just with kids, but with your school community? And so, you know, when I think about this idea of authenticity, like it's so beautiful that I found like undisputed origin. And it's not a quote, Channing, it's just like on Google, like people also ask, what does it mean to be authentic? And someone says
Yeah.
authentic, genuine, bona fide, meaning being actually and exactly what is claimed. And I just thought that that was so beautiful, because if we don't understand who we are, if we are not in that constant and continual process of understanding who we are and being in community with folks that allow us
Yeah.
to remember, that allow and guide us, right? Then we are going to have a false sense of who we are. And in turn, we are going to be inauthentic. And to
Yeah.
what my brother also talks about in Ratchetdemic, then, you know, an educational Stockholm tends to happen because
Yep.
if you as a teacher do not know who you are, then you are programming students in a curriculum or in a script or in an environment that's going to cultivate children that are not going to know who they are or honoring themselves. And so I know a lot of thoughts. Sorry, sis. You know, my
No,
brain goes everywhere.
fine. You're fine. I had two things. Abby, if you're still in the room, you asked what page number that quote was on that I read from Ratchetdemic. I don't have the book right on me, but I'm pretty sure it's the second to last paragraph of the introduction. It's at the very end of the
You know,
introduction. It's there. So if you go to the end of the introduction, that's where it is. But you also asked how brain science is connected to this. And that'll wake the bear.
I know she like, I'm ready.
No, it's all good. But, like I mentioned the brain science earlier, or just like, the hormone connections that as educators we have to be focused on constantly cooking up that mitigates the impact of stress and trauma in the brain and body. That is how this is connected, because we're creating spaces for students to connect to each other. Oftentimes when we talk about the brain science, we're talking about adults, like, oh, we need to build relationships with students. You also need to create spaces where students build relationships with each other, because if you notice, kids are their most authentic selves with other kids, because they're running their thoughts through filters for adults, because they want to impress us. They want us to think certain things about them. They want, there's a certain level of filter that comes between adult and students. But if you just sit back and watch kids together, that's when they're really their authentic selves. Okay. So we want that to be brought into the classroom, and we want trusting relationships to be built kid to kid and kid to teacher and kid to adult. Because in the brain and body, when they go through a triggering moment and their amygdala sets off, their hippocampus shuts down, and their prefrontal cortex can no longer regulate their thoughts, emotions, and their feelings and everything, then the trusting relationships of who is next to them, side to side, and who's in front of them as their teacher makes all the difference in the world with how they self-regulate through those situations and what conditions they have around them and who is around them. That will input that oxytocin, serotonin, dopamine, all the love stuff that we need to calm down.
My sister's genius.
So
You gotta say all the things.
that is what we need. That's the connection. That's why we say, and I mean it, it's stupid to deny it in the classroom. You know what I mean? So like, we have to actually be proactive in how we create these spaces and how we prioritize it and how we speak to how we prioritize it in front of kids.
Come on.
If you listen on this live and you're like, oh, I believe kids should like talk more and do turn and talks, but you never step in front of your kids and say that you value their voice out loud. Tell them that you value their voice. Tell them that they will have multiple opportunities to teach each other, to talk to each other, so that they know that it is a part of your classroom because you value it and you value them being together.
And that they will teach you.
Yeah.
This is a learning space for all of us. All of us are learners in this space.
Yes. And tell them, whatever age they are, I don't speak 8, so I'm going to need you to speak 8 for me. most of the time, most kids don't have a learning issue. They have a translation issue. There's something about the teaching that's not translating with how they need to learn and what they need to learn in order to make the connection to academics. Usually the answer is in the kid next to them, not you. So that's the best advice I would ever give to an educator. Don't assume that you know what kids need to know.
Come on.
You know the academic content, but you don't know the vessel, the venue exactly. And that is information you need to get from your kids. And be honest, my kids, look, they open, when I come in like, I don't know. I know what you need to learn. But what you are interested in that can connect point A to point B is something that we need to learn together. And I need you guys to teach me what you're interested in. If I teach you something and you have an idea and it's a connection, I don't care what it is. Let me know, because there's another kid in this classroom that will likely make that same connection as you. And that's not something I can think of with my 38-year-old brain.
Come on. Come on.
I just don't know. And it's okay to normalize not knowing as an educator. It humanizes you. It makes the family a part of the family.
Come
You
on.
know, it's so vital. So that's how the brain science connects to all of this.
Y'all know
It's
my
my
sister go
jam.
off, and I'm just here like,
It's my jam. It's my jam. It's so powerful. It's like a no brain. It's a no brainer.
pun intended. Bloop.
Yes. Yes. Oh my
Yes, I
goodness.
love that. We don't know everything. Like we do not arrive, y'all. And that's also part of the work like that I have to constantly, even think for myself. Like I don't know it all. Sometimes even like this idea or term of like expertise or like, I am a learner. I am a learner in every space. I may know a lot about something, but there is always opportunity to learn. And even taking that in any space, in a classroom, with adults, in any space that you teach and however you teach, even in this space, like we are connecting with folks on the chat, right? And so
Yeah.
we are not just having all of the thoughts, right? We're honoring the quotes that are coming in. We're honoring what people are saying, right? Because my sis and I don't know it all. Like we never arrive. That's why we read other people. That's why we build on other people's work. They allow us to have even more questions, right? And so, it's important for us to understand that we never arrive. And that's part of the self-actualizing where we need to understand certain things, right? And so
Yeah.
the only way to do that is an active process of trying to figure those things out. And so, specifically for authenticity, specifically for origin, for me, the most important message is, do we know who we are? Right? Do we know, the legacy of what we come from? Do we know
Yeah.
the power that lies within us? And so, even genetically, our melanin is powerful, y'all. And so, when I understood that deeply to my core, you know, my swag's different, like, when JC said my white different, you know what I'm saying? Like my swag different. When we know who we are, when we know the true origin that has
Yeah.
been kept from us, not people telling us about who we are, right? But us telling ourselves, allowing the stories of our grandmother, allowing, the stories of our ancestors, allowing anchors of our ancestors, whether they left it in books, whether they memorialized it in letters, right?
Yeah.
Do we understand that? Because only then and only then will we show up authentically, right? Like
Yeah.
when our brother writes ratchetdemic, yo, I am ratchet. That used to
Yeah.
be a term I used to run away from.
Yeah.
Why? Because someone gave us the origin that was not a good term for us to own. Why? When y'all appropriate it,
Yep.
right, and then sell it
Yep.
to us as style when we are the creators of it. And
Yeah.
so, even thinking about a last post that I saw on like a clean girl look with the hoops and, what we're doing right now. Hello. um you know Originators. And so
Right.
people become owners, right? If we allow that origin to be like, oh, they created it, or these are the geniuses, or these are the intellectuals, or these are the powerful people. And it's like, but I'm always vocal to say that took years. It took other people to help me remember. It took other people cultivating spaces of my own curiosity. And so when we think about ourselves as educators and as teachers, how are we doing that? And how are we
Yep.
allowing space for multiple origin stories? Like even people give Nicole Hannah Jones all that smoke for 1619. And one of the first few pages, she talks about the importance of understanding multiple perspectives,
Yep.
multiple origin stories, right?
Yep.
Because you should have questions. She says
Right.
the purpose of education is to interrogate.
Full
And if you
circle.
have a script, it doesn't allow for you to interrogate. It only allows for you to ingest. And
Yes.
so that is not the type of education that we want. That is not the type of that I want. That is not the type of education that folks that I'm in community with want. And so how can we cultivate a space where not only is that work in parallel to like how am I, you know,
Yep.
being curious, how am I asking questions, right? And then how am I creating spaces where those things also happen? And so, I think about that a lot, sis, especially when you say like, I want to chop it up with you when we come back about authenticity, because it's still a continual process to understand who I am. And
Yeah.
while I get closer and every day I get stronger, and every day, in my delicious, I love Nico, in my delicious, disturbing darkness, when I face it, it
Yeah.
allows me to have that experience to say, like, look at you. Look at
Yeah.
you becoming. And so
Yeah.
that would be such a beautiful um space that we curate when our students, like, how can we do that for our students to be like, look at me
Yeah.
coming into,
Yes.
and so, until, and I even get goosebumps until we allow that, and not just allow that, but deprogram all the things that we have learned around control, then it's really hard for ourselves to lead with authenticity. And
Yeah.
then, to cultivate spaces where our students, our families, our communities,
Yeah.
that we embrace and honor authenticity. And
Yeah.
so,
I would say,
I push that for all of us, like the work of understanding who we are. Part of this work is really understanding that, and then leveraging, that understanding so that other folks in community, are able to do that work.
yeah. And last time you came on for last season, you came on for the concept of generosity.
Mhm.
And this time is authenticity. And for both of those words, like I said, you came to mind even very early in our relationship, just in how you give so freely of just your insight. And I mean, it's expertise, but it's just who you are. It's what you've learned. It's how generously you share what you have learned with others. And so we see you as an expert because you do that very well. And you come with receipts, okay? So
CVS receipts, okay, they long.
the long receipts, and then boxes of them and rolls of them, okay? So I think one of the biggest takeaways for me in talking to you again is just, it's always like an invigorating reminder of how powerful community really is. And when I have the opportunity to share in these spaces, it only ignites my fire more to inspire teachers to create spaces like this for kids,
Come on.
because it's so true that we're always evolving. I mean, like, who we are right now and who we met, like how we met each other last December, so much has happened and changed in that time frame for the both of us.
Come on.
But when I look back on it, and even now, it's like we can be in a challenging time, but it's like so proud of evolution.
And so much growth has happened.
And
Come
so what
on.
does that mean for teachers to step in front of kids and say, this is a place of questions?
Come
And
on.
this is the power that questions have provided me in my life and with my friends. Sharing those stories with kids. I'm not the same teacher that I was a month ago, and this is why. And this is how you changed me,
Come on.
students. This is how you changed me. And so I'm constantly growing and evolving. So this is a space where the given is that you will change, and that we'll be here to change right alongside each other to learn and grow. What does that feel like in a classroom for a kid
Come on.
at every grade level? What opportunities does that produce to have those spaces? And it only happens if we talk about it, y'all. That's the only thing. I get in these spaces and I'm like, dang, but are we telling kids how we are changing? because of conversation, because of books, because of podcasts, because of lives, because
Come
of
on.
TikTok, like things that they are truly innately involved in and is not going anywhere. How is it changing us for the better? How are certain things that make us feel tight, how are those things like, what do we need to do? What questions do we need to ask so that we can do better, and then we can be better, like all of these things are so, so important, but also true to being our authentic selves, which will never stop changing.
It will never stop changing. You're going to be, you have a core, right? But what I've learned for sure, and it's so interesting that I say even that, that specific line is because I went back to a book. I'm always reading, y'all. So listen, one thing about me is I'm going to say the things, I'm going to name the names because I also feel like honoring the people and their brilliance, right? Because I am community made. Like, shout out to my brother Nico Diaz, who's in the chat, who I also mentioned earlier around
Brilliance.
His work and his pen and how I'm even reflecting and growing on that, right? But going back to Oprah Winfrey's book, What I Know for Sure, after I initially read it after my dad died, and listening to it again, and no, I'm like, it's sunk in. I don't know, I'm listening to it again and I'm like, there were so many ways that my life changed and transformed and morphed, and a lot of, to when my brother, listen, brother, I'm going to be saying these 3 words for a while and I'm going to keep giving you all the credit, but like this delicious, disturbing darkness to go into it, to uncover, to unlearn, right? Is that what I know for sure, is that we have to constantly be in a learning space. We have to constantly be in a space where we're asking questions. We have to constantly be in a space to interrogate who am I, right? And am I in that power? Am I naming and claiming, or am I allowing others to name and claim that for me? What are others saying about me? Right? Because I can also learn from that as well, right? How are others receiving me, right? Which also shapes my identity, right? But the more that we heal, the more that we do this transformative work, is that is so important in terms of the work of authenticity. And if we're not constantly interrogating that, even from moment to moment, if I were to ask you, sis, who are you? And to tell me different ways of who you are, I'm sure that today you'll tell me something and tomorrow you'll choose something else. And thereafter you'll choose something else. And so that's the same thing with our students. That's the same thing with our families. And if we don't create spaces where we're honoring communities for who they are, where we're honoring communities for their language, when we're honoring communities for their culture, when we're honoring communities for their origins, right, then we are just creating spaces of people that are going to be part of a program that we see what happens with that program. Right? It harms, it oppresses, right? It creates systems of power, it creates systems of haves and have-nots. And so I'm not trying to be a part of any of those systems, which is why I say like love is so important. Right? Because love allows us to cultivate spaces where we're able to see other people's humanity. And sometimes it's tough. Sometimes, like I told you, baby girl, sometimes it creates dissonance. Sometimes other people create dissonance with us. But what do we learn from that? Right? It's more about you than it is about them, if we're honest.
Yeah, for real.
And so that allows us to get to the core of like this authenticity, this idea of, to our brother, using ratchet as a tool, this idea of cultivating genius, this idea of, like all like thriving, like all of these brilliant folks that talk about this, right? Like if Carter G. Woodson told us that we have been miseducated, then what are we doing about that?
Right.
Right? Because if you have been miseducated, something about you is not authentic.
Truth.
And so how do we uncover,
True.
right? So that we can get to the truest version of ourselves. And we need, the desire, we need the discipline, we need the accountability, but we also need other people. And it was because of other people that saved my life, honestly, because they saved my consciousness.
Yeah.
They allowed me to be, they allowed me to uncover, they just created space. They created curiosity.
Yeah.
Imagine that, creating spaces of curiosity that allows us, space to be authentic for any educator, for any family, for any community member that's in our life. I feel like that's part of the work. And if we're not
100%.
actively doing that, then, we cannot in our truest versions be authentic. That's why, like, I got over, like, okay, y'all, I cry. Cause that's me. Y'all know. My sister's laughing because she know every episode I'm like, here
It's
we
the
go.
watery heart. It's the
Right. So
watery
it's just like,
heart.
it is, and it allows me to be who I am, and understanding that closeness and me being able to see other people and feel their humanity, like, that is powerful, that is love.
Yeah.
I'm good on it, because
Yeah.
other people told me that crying was a sign of weakness, that crying, it is a sign of fragility, not of strength. And it's like,
Which was their narrative and not
it's
yours.
their origin for me. I'm
Exactly.
not accepting it.
Exactly.
I'm naming and claiming, and it's really powerful for us to do that so that we can be authentic. And, I wish that for everyone. And I wish that, for Black women, we are constantly surveilled, we are constantly in a mode of awareness about how we show up, about our bodies, about the way that we
Yeah.
talk, about our tone, about everything. And it's just like, no, we need to just be, right? Because how other people see me is less about me than it is about them, right?
Mm,
We're
yeah.
constantly doing that work, then, our authenticity really is our truest power, because we are loved and we are loved. And if we lead that way, then it's like, who gonna stop me? Who gonna check me, boo?
I knew it. I was like, there's no way that we can say that line and not do it. It's too iconic. It's like embedded. That is programmed in us. You hear me? Who gonna check me? It
And
is.
that's what we want for our kids.
Yeah.
We want them to have that type of vibe. Like, who gonna check me, boo? Like,
Yeah.
my teacher out here creating space for me to ask questions, for me to be like, rah, rah.
Yeah.
For me to think, for me, like, how do we even cultivate spaces where our kids are doing this amongst themselves? Something like this amongst themselves, where they're talking virtually or whatever it is. Like, you
Yeah.
know, it's just all of these things. And if we just sit and reflect on that, then I feel like we will get closer to really creating, spaces and learning spaces that value authenticity, that value love, and that value things that are off the script.
Yeah. And
They're off the script.
all that requires us to ask questions as well. Because
Come
it's
on.
like, we think like, oh, how do we create these spaces? Like, how do we do it? Like, how do we help students like see the value in each other? Ask them.
Come on. My sis said they do it naturally. Exactly.
We gotta
We
ask
just have to
them.
make room. Exactly. We don't
We
even got to do
bogged
anything.
down. We bogged down ourselves with just like how do we best do this for kids? Like with no kids, in the conversation. Like when I tell you, when you give them the opportunity to give the ideas, they flow. When I tell you the ideas flow, one
That's what
because
my
like
sister's brilliant. It's like made room. So many people have made room for us. And how can we make room for others? Like, ooh, that's what I'm saying. Like, even us, like, we come into the
yeah.
live, and it's like my sis out here dropping bars, and so, yeah, like like even the thought of like, how do I, what do I need to do? And it's just like, start over, make room.
Yeah.
Room.
Yeah.
That's it.
I wish I had this perspective. Like,
Me too,
especially
sis.
during this time where like teachers are preparing or they just went back this week or whatever, like they're preparing their environments. Like I never took the time to sit and think about like the feel.
Come
Like,
on.
what do I want this room to feel like? I knew what I wanted it to look like. I had that on lock. But the feel of my room, even that, I wouldn't even want to say that anymore. You know what I
Come
mean? Like
on. You
it's a
caught
lens,
it.
right? It's a whole lens of like, ooh, oh. So we'll wrap up on this note because this changed my whole mind, right? And this is another one with Dr. Emden. He be he be throwing stuff out there. So in a live recently, and I shared this with teachers in my PDs this summer. Like it blew my mind because he said he stopped or shifted the language of him constantly saying like our kids or our students.
Come on. Come on.
But he said he replaced it. He replaced it with those
With
that will
those that will
inherit the
inherit
earth
the earth. Ooh.
and transform it. And I was like mind blown, mind blown, mind blown. You want to know why though? Because I was like, if teachers shifted that mindset and that language of ownership of the classroom, of the learning, of your students, you will stop thinking about just what happens in your four walls and you will be thinking about your students as big and expansive as what they're going to become. And you have no control over that. So it's like you will constantly be thinking with a so that you can mindset. I want to teach you this so that it expands beyond your room. And I always say that you don't teach kids for your classroom, you teach them to leave it. So what is that mindset? And so that aligns so perfectly with what I feel in my spirit of not claiming and having ownership over my students' learning. And what does it mean for them to have ownership of it? Because they're going to have it when they leave.
Come on.
And they're going to need to do something with it when they leave as they inherit and transform the earth. So you're not my students. You're kids that will grow to inherit the earth. And it totally blew my whole curl back.
Me too, sis. My edges is now going back. You see the baby here. Nah, but even, this is the book I'm reading now. I know, coffee. I drink my cafecitos. Don't drag me, okay? But this is the book I was talking about. Yeah, I know I got my little tabs.
It's well loved.
Chapter of possibility. How ironic. It says, everything you do and say shows the world who you are. Let it be the truth.
Woo.
So when we think about authenticity, right, what is the truth? What is the truth about who we are? And do we have deep understanding who we are? Do we have truth in who we are, right? Who are the folks that are giving us those origins about ourselves? What are we saying about ourselves? And what truth are you saying about yourself? And how are we allowing and making room for people to see that truth about who they are, right? Not who we say they are, but who they are. And I think that's what's really important, right? Like, let it be in truth. And those that will inherit the earth, they will, and they will have an understanding of who they are, right? And how do we cultivate spaces that makes room for that? Not who we tell them they are, right? Because that's why I'm in healing work right now, because so many people told me what I was.
Yeah.
You are this, you do this, you do this, you provide this, you do. And now I'm like, no, hell no, no, F no, no, shit, no, and no.
Yes. One for every finger. Okay.
Y'all know when you got nails, you gotta talk with you. Sis, I love you. Listen, me and my sister have a series. I mean, we could get on here for hours. I told my baby to turn the oven off. I'm over here momming. They still, my family still is like, sis, we need to eat.
Yeah, no, go. Yeah. I love
But you know, sis, I love that you are doing this, that you are cultivating spaces for this, that you even realized to bring your baby into these questions, because that's what inspired me to start having and asking my daughter those questions. If you wouldn't have said, I put my baby on this podcast and I'm asking my baby these questions, that seed would have not. And it's so crazy, you made room for that by just
Oh,
saying it, by just sharing it. You made room for me to like ask, you know, my kids questions. You know, sometimes when I get on with people that I, you know, the when I had Uncle Tim and it was hip hop ed, you know, I had my son give me questions. You know,
yeah.
I was asking him questions. And so you not surprised, brother, because you know when we come on, she gonna make all the time for me. Okay, so
He played me. He tried to play me like I go to bed
he's like,
early.
I'm surprised because you know us just got a tight ship. Okay, but that's what I'm talking about, boundaries. But we loving on each other, and we haven't been in community in a minute, but you know, I'm just so proud of you, of the words. You know, words are fluid. You know, you said a quote about authenticity. I found a different definition of authenticity, but we were still
Yeah.
able to come together and have so much synergy and even like learn from and reflect and just think about even this might even look differently in a talk 6 months from now about
Yeah.
authenticity or what we think about it. And so if we always have that mindset, you know, I'm just so proud of you that you are like reshaping the type of lives, like you're doing professional. I told her she's doing professional development lives. Like she got over here all the graphics. Like, you know, I hope that the folks come on, you know, truly understand the power of this space and the power of words and how that even shapes, you know, cultivating who we are, right?
Yeah.
And just you doing that for me and saying like, yo, I'm when I'm listening to you and you're like, I'm doing that with my son, and I'm like, I'm gonna do that with like instantly. You know, it changes mothering in a way, and people don't. That's what people don't see in the back end. That people see,
Yeah.
oh, a live of an hour, but people don't see of what happens in the back end. People don't see how folks like you know, are helping to change lives so that, you know, just by me asking my daughter these type of questions, like, boom, it's an instant change. It's an instant imprint that she's gonna have in her mind. And so I just want to thank you for always having me on. I want to thank you for having me on twice. Like, I just feel
I
so
think you
honored.
need to be my first guest for Rewinds, like forever.
Period.
The
Come
first
on.
word, Johnny has claim on whatever first word of every season.
I love you, sis. No, listen, you